Are Harry and Meghan's antics taking attention from the King? How has the King been caught up in the Prince Andrew spy scandal? And why is everyone talking about Prince William's new sports punditry? We've got a great show coming up for you. Hello and welcome to Palace Confidential, the world's very best royal talk show. I'm Jo Eldon and here this week is Daily Mail columnist, royal biographer and broadcaster Robert Hardman and the paper's diary editor Richard Eden. Welcome to you both. Now, before you all start screaming at me, where is Rebecca? Don't panic. She sent us a very special report from a royal tour this week. Now, a reminder, if you don't already, like this video and join the more than 400,000 subscribers to the Daily Mail Royals YouTube channel. That way you'll never miss this show or the other videos we put out, like a special Q&A with veteran royal correspondent Richard Kay that's coming next week, or our explainer of the Prince Harry charity scandal, which we put out earlier this week, and that will play straight after this. Right, well, first up, lots of couples do choose to spend big wedding anniversaries with romantic trips to Italy. Few, however, get to do what Charles and Camilla have done this week by spending it on a grand state visit there. Now, of course, it would not be a celebration for them if Rebecca English wasn't there. I keep telling you, no one believes me, there's 3 people in that marriage. She has sent us this lovely report.
No prizes for guessing why I'm this week. I'm, of course, in Rome, covering their Majesty's historic state visit to Italy, but first it was the King became head of state. Of course, the news headlines back in London are being dominated by Prince Harry's surprise court appearance, and we have Meghan's new podcast dropping with further revelations on the first day of the King and Queen's visit. But you would be surprised, or perhaps not, about how little these events are affecting what's happening here in Italy. The King and Queen have a hugely important job flying the flag for Britain and strengthening Anglo-Italian ties on everything from trade, defence to culture and sustainable energy. On Tuesday, President Mattarella greeted their Majesties in the Palazzo Quirinale with full pomp and pageantry, including a stunning flypast by the British Red Arrows and their Italian counterparts. I think this shows the couple's dedication to duty and their determination not to be derailed by Harry and Meghan's antics. I think it's also worth noting, as I revealed in the Daily Mail today, that the King flew to London on Sunday night to undergo routine and scheduled cancer treatment just hours before he and the Queen flew to Italy. I think the fact that the King underwent treatment just hours before a major diplomatic undertaking as head of state only goes to underline the dignity he has shown since being diagnosed with cancer last year, and the way he has repeatedly put duty before personal comfort, much in the way his late mother did. I think what's clear is that the King is determined to get on with matters in hand here in Rome, in marked contrast to events back at home, and that, Buckingham Palace say, is what matters.
Rebecca English there enjoying the Dolce Vita by the Colosseum. Now, we'll get to the issue of what she calls Harry and Meghan's antics in a couple of minutes. But before then, Robert Hardman, welcome to the show. Nice to see you. From where you've been sitting, has Charles and Camilla's tour been a success?
Well, hello, Jo. Yes, I think it has. I mean, a state visit is all about, it's the highest diplomatic compliment one nation pays another, and it's been a huge success in Italy. It's not just been big news. You've got the entire Italian establishment wanting to meet the King and Queen. Great visuals. I mean, the sort of sight of them standing next to the Colosseum, the sight of the Red Arrows and the Italian equivalent flying over them, the sight of, them getting a blessing from the Pope on their wedding anniversary. I mean, it's ticked all the boxes. I imagine at the Foreign Office, everyone is extremely pleased because Italy's an important European ally. These are turbulent times, and we keep hearing a lot about soft power. Well, we've seen soft power on a huge scale in Rome this week.
Absolutely, and I love Rome. I wish I was in Rome, don't you?
I've never been. I'm very jealous seeing these images of Rebecca by the Colosseum.
Now, Richard, Rebecca did paint a very sweet portrait of the pair in a piece that she wrote earlier this week, didn't she?
She did, yeah. It was very striking. It was a piece that I know Rebecca had been working on for ages, and she talked to, really key people in their lives. And the one that struck me was Queen Camilla's sister, Annabel Elliot, and she was talking about what's the secret of their success, what keeps them together. And the thing she highlighted was the Queen's sense of humour. So she said they've been the same ever since they were little girls. Their dad had to separate them in church because they were always giggling. And
I love that. Yeah.
And she enjoys a good laugh with the king. And and just as Queen Elizabeth did, they love it when things go wrong. That gives them a laugh. But not taking things too seriously, and also the fact that they're not competing. Not for a moment is Queen Camilla trying to upstage the king or anything like that. She's trying to help him as much as she can. Whatever could you be
inferring there, Richard Eden?
Well, I think, yes. I mean, obviously we think back to Diana and that sort of thing. And it's a very different type of relationship, but clearly a very supportive one.
They do. They really do. They finish each other's sentences. They're always looking out for things that will kind of amuse the other. It is a real love story, and I always like when they're on tours. It's probably been happening a bit in Italy this week, but when the king talks for too long to people in a crowd, and he does love a chat, and everyone's looking at their watches, and the entourage are getting more and more nervous, and no one quite wants to go up to him and go, "Sir, can you get a move on?" So they'll have a whisper to the Queen, and the Queen has this very sweet thing. She'll just gently nudge him in the small of his back with the corner of her handbag, and it's kind of the signal to sort of, "No, come on, let's get a move on."
Oh, I love that.
And she does. She calls him the boss. There is this sort of understanding. He's in charge. He is the king, but at the same time, he's just, these tours don't go nearly as well if she's not around. It's different, and that's why I think this week it's the Italian public have seen that as well. There is it's a rapport, a tenderness, and you often don't see that with politicians, but you do see it with the king and queen.
Indeed. And Richard, the couple released a lovely portrait of their own as well, didn't they?
Yeah, this is almost the sort of first thing they did when they got to Italy was release a portrait to mark their 20th wedding anniversary, which was yesterday. A series of photographs by Chris Jackson, who's been taking the royals' pictures for years and is excellent. And it was just a very warm, engaging picture, and I think also showed how happy they are to be there in Italy. And I mean, come on, where better to be for your wedding anniversary than the Eternal City?
Yeah, I was in South East London for my 25th. Didn't quite have the same
magical
ring to it. Yeah, no offence, South East London, my home. Now, Robert, you were actually in Windsor for their wedding all those years ago. What are your memories of the day?
Well, I just remember the build-up to it, as so often happens actually with royal events. There's always a sort of series of dramas in the run-up. Things always tend to go wrong, and if it's a royal event, then it's obviously big news. So in their case, there were problems with the licensing arrangements. The plan to originally get married at the castle couldn't happen for legal reasons. Then with days to go, just before the wedding, the Pope died, and as the sort of national mourner-in-chief, the Prince of Wales, as he was then, he was expected to go to Rome for the Pope's funeral. So everything got moved. And yet, come the day...
I've forgotten all of this.
That was Pope John Paul, wasn't it?
John Paul II. I mean, it's funny how popes do seem to feature rather large in the life of the Supreme Governor of the Church of England. Yeah. But it was, it come the day, it was all, you just felt there was this huge pivot. It was a great landmark, sort of turning point for the monarchy. Suddenly, they were going off in a new direction, and obviously it had been a long time coming. They were very concerned. The monarchy, the Queen, as well as Prince Charles and the then Camilla Parker Bowles, they knew that they had to tread carefully because obviously people were still very mindful of the death of Diana, Princess of Wales, but that was back in 1997. Now this was 2005, and on the day you just felt this was right. And the thing I think people forget is that what everyone worried about most was how will William and Harry, how will they respond to this? And actually, I was making a documentary then for the Beeb, and we had a camera in the quadrangle as the happy couple left, and you see this lovely scene of both Harry and William giving both their father and their stepmother a great big kiss, and then sort of chucking confetti all over them.
Isn't it?
And the car, they've decorated the car, and it's got sort of just married, just like so many cars. Even the royal Bentley's got sort of just married and on it. And the two boys are there, and they sort of chase the car out of the castle, doing funny faces at their father, and it's just a very sweet day, and that's how I remember it. And while I've been writing writing the King's biography, again, you just see the way that this is a love story. It has endured. I mean, you mentioned the Queen's sister, Annabelle Elliot. I interviewed her for the book. She just said, she is his rock, and in a sense, he's her rock. And they're different in lots of ways, in lots of little ways. He hates lunch, for example. She, on the other hand, she's patron of a charity called the Big Lunch. He likes having the windows open, lots of air. He hates heating. The Queen likes it really nice and warm, so she's always shutting the windows again. And it's that sort of relationship.
That could explain why they have separate homes for the weekend.
Yes. Every successful marriage needs separate homes. But it's so interesting. I can't help thinking a lot about, say 30 years ago, how unthinkable their union would be, and look where we are. It really is a love story, isn't it?
We are. I mean, times change, and the monarchy has to move with the times. I mean, in living memory, there were times when members of divorced people couldn't go near members of the royal family. They couldn't be in the royal enclosure at Ascot. It was deemed, inconceivable that the members of the royal family, for example, might not marry a princess, and then it was deemed inconceivable they might not marry an aristocrat. And now, things change, life moves on, and the monarchy has to move with it. And here we are. I remember years ago there was a huge controversy that the Prince of Wales, as then was on a trip to Italy and was going to meet the Pope, and people said, "Oh, hang on, this he's a future head of the Church of England. This is not appropriate." I mean, look, you've got the Pope blessing their wedding anniversary. It's great. Yeah. No one's complaining. It's 21st century, and we all have to move on.
Indeed. Well, Richard, in news that perhaps the King might be less pleased to read, he was caught up in the row over Prince Andrew's connections to an alleged Chinese spy.
Yes, this is, it emerged from, we were waiting to see these documents, which was, it was what Prince Andrew's aide, Dominic Hampshire, had written in support of this man who is an alleged, who denies being a spy for China, but that's what's alleged, and he's been banned from Britain. Anyway, so Dominic Hampshire was writing in his support, and in these documents, he mentioned that he'd had 2 meetings with Prince Andrew and King Charles to discuss basically how they were going to fund Prince Andrew's future. So we should make clear the alleged spy wasn't there at the time, but he was involved with a fund that they were talking about for the future. So it is embarrassing because it dragged the King into this controversy, but hopefully that's the end of it. Although
never seems to be where Prince Andrew's concerned.
Well, no, because it does show that the King was keen to find some way of sort of funding Andrew in the future, rather than giving him money himself. And it does kind of highlight the problems that come with that.
Oh dear. Well, staying with you, Richard, just for a second, and you've got quite an intriguing update on Prince George's schooling. What's that all about?
Oh yeah, this is just that, found out that Prince George had visited Eton College earlier this year, and he'd been to visit the accommodation where he would stay if he goes to that school. He's got 4 more terms left at Lambert School, which he attends with his brother and sister. But next year he'll be going to secondary school. And it's still, everything I hear, it's still not decided yet. There's various, hoops to go through. But the big question is, there is a bit of a dilemma because it's whether Eton is the right school for him. And what's highlighted that is how it was very much the right school for Prince William. He loved it, really thrived there. But Prince Harry didn't. He's written in his memoirs about how he felt it wasn't the right school for him. It was too academic. And it wasn't the right choice. So, they're taking that into account for Prince George, and Princess Catherine went to a different type of school. She went to Marlborough College, which is mixed with girls there as well. Whether they want the teenage Prince George to be mixing with girls is at a boarding school is another matter that could bring its own complications.
Oh, goodness. We're not there yet, are we? Don't depress me. He's still a cute little boy.
Yeah, exactly. Any parent with a child due to go to secondary school will have been through the same thing, where they're sort of weighing up different options, thinking, could this be right? You know, so there's a lot to sort of go through before he actually starts in the autumn of next year.
Do not miss those days. Good luck. Good luck, Walesers. Good luck. Robert, for a traditional family, there's surprisingly little tradition, isn't there, on how the royals do choose schooling?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. Just this week, our new podcast, which the Mail puts out, Queens, Kings and Dastardly Things, which covers all forms of royal life, past, present, you name it, we discuss it. And this week we do look at how the royals have sort of brought up their children over the centuries. And school is really a relatively new concept. I mean, Queen Victoria was sort of brought up by a governess, and that sort of tradition really carried on. I mean, George V was sort of sent off to the Navy with his brother, George VI, likewise. And Elizabeth II, as a princess, she and Margaret, they had a governess, famously Cynthia Crawford, known as Crawfie, who then wrote a famous book. We go into that because she wrote this book, and that caused a huge scandal in the 50s. And it's often said that the royal family were very mean to Crawfie after that. I'm not so sure they were mean. It was a great betrayal by her. But it was really only when you come to Charles and Andrew and Edward, that's when royalty start going to school. And obviously in the case of the king, we know that he loathed his time at Gordonston. A lot of people picked on him just because he's a future king. They wanted to be able to say, I floored the future king. So in every rugby match, he was a target. But he did love his 2 terms away from Gordonston when he was sent down to Australia to Geelong Grammar School. He absolutely adored that. He found that it was a great release. Whereas his younger brothers, actually, they thrived at Gordonston. Princess Anne, meanwhile, she went to Benenden. She started off with a governess, and she said, no, I want to go to school like my brothers, and she loved Benenden.
Go, Anne.
Go,
Anne.
I think she'd have rather liked to have gone to Gordonston, actually, because she sent her own children there.
Perhaps Prince George could be sent to Australia.
Well, you could do worse.
Yeah,
Aussies, they'd love to have him, I'm sure.
I mean, it was a real eye-opener. It's one of the reasons that the king is so fond of Australia to this day. He loves reminiscing about his sort of trips out in the wilds with.
We are a delightful people.
Yeah, well, you certainly were to him.
Indeed, yes. I remember someone, speaking of tackling him, running up to him in the surf to plant a kiss on him. Do you remember that picture?
Oh, yeah. Well, that was his Action Man days.
Aussies are not backward in coming forward. Well, that podcast sounds fascinating, and if you want to hear that, just search for Queens, Kings and Dastardly Things in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favourite podcast app. Now, click follow so you never miss an episode. Now, Richard, a word on William before we get to the comments. He surprised a lot of people with his sporting knowledge.
Yeah, I was very impressed with this. It's just that his favourite football team is Aston Villa, and they're in the Champions League, and they were playing in Paris against Paris Saint-Germain. And he thought, they haven't been in Europe, such a competition for quite a long time. And so he thought it'd be great during the school holidays to take Prince George with him. So that they went to the match. And then at half time, the TV cameras sort of asked him to give his thoughts on how the match was going, and he gave some very good, very impressive analysis of the match. And
I wouldn't know the difference between good and bad personally. But
No, it was good, and it certainly impressed the other pundits who were there, who I think was slightly worried they might be put out of a job.
The guy who would be king of Italy if Italy still had a monarchy. We were talking about Italy earlier. He's actually a football commentator as well. There was a royal Italian football commentator.
Well, there's an alternative career for William if we have a revolution.
Oh, absolutely. We'll perish that thought. But yes, indeed. Keep that in mind, Prince William. Well, Harry and Meghan have been dominating the headlines this week, sometimes at the expense of the king. We'll have more on that in just a moment. Before then, here are some thoughts from you, the viewers. Last week's show had 3,000 comments and a number of interesting questions relating to the royal trip to Italy. So we thought we'd try to answer a few of those for you. Ruth Gallett says, thanks for a great video. I wonder, with the king and queen going to Italy, would it not be a nice idea to have Princess Beatrice's husband, Edo Mapelli Mozzi, accompany them, or would that be inappropriate? Robert, would something like that ever happen?
It wouldn't really, because it's the head of state is invited by another head of state. So, it might, I'm sure, if, for example, the president of Italy was coming on a state visit to Britain, then that would be a moment to introduce Eduardo. But Eduardo, it must be remembered, he's not that Italian. His father actually competed for Britain at the Olympics, so the Winter Olympics. So it's a nice idea, but I think the entourage is pretty big already.
It's interesting because when I read that question, I was thinking, Edo is one of the royals I have actually met, and he's very British, like very, very.
Well, he's very British. He's very Italian, but I'm sure when that Italian state visit comes to the palace, he'll be at the table. Yeah,
indeed. Well, thank you for that. Well, Helen Slater asks, interesting, the visit to Italy given these times. Of course, it's been organised for ages, but trade ties, etc., etc. Let's not go there. When's the next royal visit to Canada? And what about Denmark? Probably a good place for a royal to visit. Now, Richard, we know the King is very keen to visit Canada. Denmark, possibly a little bit delicate at the moment. What do you think?
I thought there was a very interesting and perhaps telling moment when King Charles made his speech in Rome, and he introduced himself as the King of the United Kingdom and also of Canada.
Yeah.
Now, I'm sure I'm not the only one to interpret that as an act of solidarity with Canada after various comments that have been made recently from President Donald Trump.
I think that in that case he was making the point that because it had been British and Canadian troops who'd been particularly involved in a lot of the anniversaries he's marking while he's there. But yeah, you're right. I mean, it's always useful to remind the rest of the world that he is king, not just of Britain, but of 14 other countries as well, including Australia and obviously including Canada.
Exactly.
But that, I think Canada is a much more urgent appointment because he's king. Denmark, I'm sure he'd love to go there. He'd love to go to all the other European countries, but that one will probably have to wait.
I think what's notable is obviously Italy. He is receiving cancer treatment. He had treatment literally the night before going.
Yes.
So he can manage this short trip, but Canada is a bigger. Would be a bigger event, but Greenland, yes, Denmark.
Oh my goodness,
it's all very sensitive.
What do you think, Robert? Do you think that he will be hinting that he wants to go to Canada?
I think a trip to Canada is overdue. I mean, as the sovereign of Canada, he would have gone. I think. He would have thought about going towards the end of last year. Obviously, medical problems, and also there's always been the prospect of an election. There's a very strong royal convention.
Yeah.
You don't go to countries when an election is in prospect. I thought it was very interesting. Just in the last month, he's actually met 2 Canadian prime ministers here in Britain because both outgoing PM Justin Trudeau, incoming PM Mark Carney, both come through Britain, and the King has seen them in person.
Yeah.
So I think once the Canadian election is out of the way, things have settled down, I think a trip to Canada would be perfectly logical.
How lovely. Well, Diane Kappas asks, if the King is addressing the Italian Parliament, how is that not political? Robert, what's your view on that?
There's a long tradition of monarchs addressing assemblies on their travels. I mean, one of the great speeches I thought that the late Queen Elizabeth II made was to the Joint Houses of Congress in Washington on her state visit in 1991. It was just after the Gulf War, and she addressed both Houses of Congress. And if you remember, the day before, she'd arrived in Washington, and the rostrum was so low that all people could see was a hat, and that became a big story. And she arrived in Congress, so arrived there, in front of both the Senate and Congress, and stood up and opened with the remark, "I hope you can all see me today." And the whole place just fell apart, and they gave her a standing ovation before she'd even started. So there is as I say, there's a tradition, and the King is very good at these speeches. I remember his first state visit he did of the reign. He went to Germany, and I was in Berlin with him, and watching him in the Bundestag talking a lot in German actually, and really making lots of important points. And I thought his speech was absolutely pitch perfect, the one he did in Rome, because it was lots of humour in there, but there were lots of important messaging as well. And I think it's the sort of speech that a constitutional monarch can make, not full of policy. That's what politicians do. I think they enjoyed it. He got 2 ovations, and you can do that. And it's not party politics. It's head of state speaking,
and it's
not
that soft power, like you were saying earlier.
Totally, yeah. So no, it's fine, and I would expect him. He did it in France, by the way, on his visit there. I think it's become a thing. He's very comfortable doing these speeches, and he's quite a good he's a very good linguist. I mean, I've heard him speak French and German before, and even a bit of Arabic. I hadn't heard him speak Italian before.
Wow.
Well, My daughter's studying Italian at university, and she said she was very impressed with
He got the
his
accent
Italian
right, did he?
speech. Yeah, I think he might be better than some of her fellow students. So,
excellent. There you go. Well, we also put out an explainer video into the Prince Harry sent to Bali charity scandal that also attracted lots of comments, and thank you so much for those. This is from Nikki Kitchen, who says, charities should be run locally. The people who live there and work there know what is needed. Fundraising is able to be done anywhere, but the decisions for how the money is spent and how the charity is run should be local. Cornelia says this of the charity's chair, Dr. Sophie Chanduka. I'm a huge fan of Dr. C. She has been fair and transparent. She's given Harry credit where it was due and tried to support his efforts, and all she got was a kick from behind. Well, also a few of you asked about the African Parks charity, and we have covered that, and we will with any developments on that story. Let's move on. Prince Harry flew into the UK this week as he appealed a decision to strip him of police protection in the UK. Richard, is there any way of briefly bringing us up to speed on that story?
yes, essentially, the courts have ruled that Prince Harry is not entitled to automatic taxpayer-funded protection when he's in this country. He's not happy with that, and he's appealed against it, and this is the appeal court hearing his appeal this week. His view is that he should have it, and that he's been unfairly denied this protection when he's in Britain, and he clearly feels very strongly about it.
It's interesting, isn't it? Robert, a few media outlets reported that Harry didn't see the King while they were both in the country. But that won't be a surprise to you, will it? As in your biography, you revealed there's a legal reason why the King feels they can't meet.
Yeah, there's a what they call legal jeopardy, which is the simple fact that here you have the son of the King suing the King's ministers in the King's court, and that just creates all sorts of legal problems. And if it would only need Harry to have a conversation with his father and then afterwards let slip, oh, my dad said this or my dad said that. And as we know, he does repeat conversations quite readily. That could lead to all sorts of problems with, it could actually bring down a court case because, I mean, the King is the fount of justice. So he's got to be very careful. So, I mean, for all sorts of other reasons, there may be other reasons why the King doesn't want to see Harry right now. I mean, let's not forget there's a lot of stress. He's someone undergoing medical treatment. So people are trying to keep the sort of the stress levels down. But there is his legal advice is you can't talk, you can't have a conversation until all this is sorted out.
And what do you think of this court case? A lot of people who are in support of Harry would say, but he's offering to pay for this security himself. That seems to be like a major thread of the protest, doesn't it?
I think it's a ridiculous case. I mean, how on earth should he be entitled to it? I mean, just that sense of entitlement is incredible. He has chosen to quit royal duties, and with that came, the protection and everything alongside it. So, he is trying to have all the benefits of, being a working royal without that.
I suppose what he's arguing, isn't it, is that he's still in the line of succession. He's still born into this royal life. He still is the target of security threats. Is that fair?
Well, and his argument is that he's been denied it unfairly and that sort of proper processes haven't been followed. But, we'll wait to see what the appeal court says, what the judgment is.
And royal security is always done on a sort of case-by-case basis. I'm quite sure if he's in a public space in this country, we're not going to be told what the security arrangements are, but there are going to be some, and they'll be done very thoroughly. I think one thing, talking to lawyers this week, what surprised a lot of people was the simple fact that Prince Harry decided to come to sit in court at what is a sort of fairly technical, dry set of proceedings at the Court of Appeal. This is not where you would normally expect someone who's brought the case. It's normally you just leave it to the lawyers to thrash it out. I think a lot of people in the legal profession were going, well, why is he there?
Well, you revealed, Richard, didn't you, that even though he's been here, he missed the wedding of an old pal.
Yes, I mean, this is very striking because it's a friend, Charles Vivian, Lord Vivian, who appeared in that Band of Brothers picture at Harry and Meghan's wedding. And it was, his best mates were with him. And it was Lord Vivian's second wedding. And at his first, Prince Harry was actually an usher. So, he was very conspicuous by his absence at the weekend. And when I spoke to Charles Vivian about it, I said, "Oh, was he invited?" He said, "Yes, he was." And I said, "Well, do you know why he didn't come?" And he did seem a bit uncomfortable and said, "Oh, I think he's got a lot on." But
washing his hair.
But sources close to Harry have since said the reason he didn't go was because sort of security for this trip is such an issue. I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, let's be frank. So he didn't go because he could hardly stand up in court on Monday and say, "Oh, I'm in such danger," when actually he'd been, living it up at a wedding a couple of days earlier. But this highlights the situation he's got himself in, where he keeps missing, weddings of friends and important events because he's got to maintain that, his life's in mortal danger in Britain. But this is the guy who's happy to go off to, crime-riddled Colombia or, Nigeria on tour. It's nonsense. His arguments just don't hold any weight.
Well, it's interesting. I know I made a bit of a cheeky, cynical comment about why he decided to come to Britain and make headlines. But then Richard Kay, your colleague, did write a piece this week that we'll put below in the comments. He quotes a courtier as saying, "It is an unwritten rule that when the monarch is on an official overseas visit, the rest of the family have a duty to avoid anything that grabs the limelight." So has Harry forgotten everything about royal life, Richard Kay asks?
Well, certainly. I mean, you've seen the headlines this week. I mean, why Harry decided to come for legal proceedings, which, and it's a long way. It wasn't that he was just around the corner and thought, "I'll just drop into the court, see what's going on." That required planning, and it seemed to me an unnecessary and quite surprising appearance.
Provocative?
I wouldn't say provocative. I mean, let's face it. Perhaps he hasn't got that much going on. Hasn't got another TV series to produce.
Not at the moment. No.
I'll go and sit in court and see what happens. But he wasn't expected to be there. There was no reason for him. He wasn't participating in the proceedings. But the simple fact that he was in the country, turning up at the courts, knowing the cameras would be there, inevitably that's going to draw attention away to a very important state visit.
What do you think about that timing, Richard?
The big difference is that they don't coordinate anymore. Obviously, when they were working royals, there was a diary that was coordinated, so, these clashes wouldn't happen. But now there's not. Was it a coincidence? I don't know. We also have another big event in the lives of the Sussexes this week, which I think we'll go on to talk about,
yes.
Which is the launch of Meghan's podcast.
Yes, indeed.
So, they want publicity for themselves. And as we said, Harry wasn't speaking in court, so he made an active choice to attend that and not to attend the wedding of one of his best friends.
Do you think he would have listened to his wife's podcast on the long journey over?
I'm sure he's listened to them all before he's left.
What about you? Have you listened? Meghan has launched her podcast this week. What did you think of it?
I have, and there are many aspects I love about my job, but listening to Meghan's podcast, I'm afraid, is not one of them.
Oh, no. Don't disappoint. What's it called? Confessions of an Entrepreneur, is that it? No, what's it called?
Confessions of a Female Founder.
That's right, yes. Yeah.
And for her first episode this week, she had a big name. It was the name for me, which is a struggle to remember.
Whitney Wolfe Herd.
Great name.
Yeah.
She's big success. She founded Bumble dating app. Became I think the youngest on paper female billionaire. And she's become a good friend of Harry and Meghan. So really interesting person. I'd like to find out more about her, what made her success, but I just didn't hear that.
Right.
It was a lot about Meghan, and the conversation, even when it was meant to be about her guest, seemed to end up with how impressed that her guest had been when she'd seen newsstands in Ireland with all stories about Meghan and this type of thing. But so unfortunately there was not much to learn from it. And Meghan may have been a good actress or not. She was an actress before, but I don't think she's showing good skills as a presenter.
Well, I haven't listened to all of it, but I've seen a lot of terrible reviews. I haven't seen one good review. Have you?
I don't think they're biased at all. I think this is people just listen to. I challenge anyone to have a listen and tell me if they thought it was.
Do we know who else is coming up on the lineup of guests?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. We can wait with bated breath. Yeah.
I'm sure there'll be some other big names.
Yeah.
Other podcasts are available.
Oh,
That's all I'd say.
yes, just in case. Queens, Kings, and Dastardly Things. I like that title better. I like that one.
It rolls off the tongue, doesn't it?
It really does, yeah. It sounds almost like a Roald Dahl kind of title. But, now, to a couple more royal stories that we couldn't finish the show without covering. Richard, there's been an update on the story of Prince Andrew's accuser, Virginia Giuffre, hasn't there, who claimed last week to have had 4 days to live.
Yes, I mean, she's still alive and she's been discharged from hospital in Australia. But, as we mentioned last week, it's the whole case is grisly. It's very unpleasant. There's a lot going on. She's seems to have separated from her husband. She's been making claims about him. There's been a restraining order. She was due in court over that. And I mean, when she left hospital, she didn't have those nasty bruises which we'd seen earlier. But it's become a very kind of unpleasant story and spectacle, really.
She just continues to be a troubled individual, doesn't she?
I think she certainly is, and has become more prominent as a result of her post. So we'll see what happens.
Indeed. Well, on to a lovely, much lighter story, Robert. Royal watchers around the world were delighted in this picture of King Charles appearing to play a carrot. There's another skill.
And he really is playing a carrot, actually. He was holding a reception for music in the community. I mean, he does love his receptions. And this was the first reception since he had his a recent bump in the road, as the palace put it, with his medical treatment. So it was good to see him back. And one of the guests, or several of the guests, belonged to something called the London Vegetable Orchestra, who play, they're professional musicians, but as a sideline, they play music using vegetables. And they handed the king a carrot, and he took part, or attempted to take part, in a rendition of Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star on vegetables.
Delightful. This is what we love about Britain, isn't it?
Maybe he'll do the national anthem next
whimsy.
time.
Yeah,
it's hard to imagine Queen Elizabeth doing the same, isn't it?
Yeah, let's all just take a moment to try and mentally have that picture. But no, yes, now, can you hear that? It is time to celebrate someone from the royal world who we think deserves more attention. Sometimes it's a royal, sometimes it's someone within the family or the household. Richard, this week it's a group. Who is our unsung royal hero?
Yeah, this is not an individual. I'd like to nominate the Australian Monarchist League. And the reason I do so is because in Australia, Queen Elizabeth was on their $5 banknotes, $5 bills, since 1992. But they're bringing out a new design, and the banks announced that it won't feature King Charles. Instead, it will focus on Indigenous communities. Well, the Monarchist League say, great.
That's a big thumbs down from you, is it? Good to know.
They say, we want to celebrate Indigenous communities. That's great.
Yeah.
But they've come up with their own design, which has some Indigenous imagery, but also has the image of King Charles, who is the monarch of Australia.
Right.
So they feel strongly about it. So let's hope it's not too late for the bank to change its mind and to put the king on its banknotes.
Oh, okay. So we don't have a decision, or we do?
I think they have decided, but they could still change their minds. I don't think the notes have been printed yet. Wow. So do the right thing, bank.
Okay,
is he still on the coins?
I think he's on some coins, yes.
Yeah, I can't remember the last time I
You've
saw a coin.
got to have heads and tails, haven't you?
I can't remember the last time I held a coin.
Sorry, I think Queen Elizabeth was on the coins. Yes. I don't know if King Charles is on any coins.
He must be sort of like migrating to the coin.
Well, he's on the coins here.
Yeah, there you go. I didn't know that. I haven't seen one, as I say. Well, apparently the Australian Monarchist League has 20,000 members, so surely some of you are viewers of this show, so please let us know in the comments below. Now, as we mentioned earlier, this week the King and Queen passed a big milestone as they celebrated 20 years of wedded bliss. To mark that occasion, we thought we'd pull together some of our favourite moments of them together over the past 2 decades. Congratulations to their majesties from all of us here at Palace Confidential, and a reminder to keep an eye out for our special Q&A with Richard Kay about Princess Diana next week. If you'd like a reminder of that, please press that subscribe button so you're notified when it comes out. A reminder also that Robert's podcast is called Queens, Kings and Dastardly Things. We'll put a link to that below. Up next, it's the special explainer video we put out earlier this week on Prince Harry's Centre Bali charity scandal. Click here for that. Just time to say thank you to my guests, Robert and Richard, and to you, of course, for watching. We'll see you next week. Bye for now.